Welcome to everybody joining. Happy Tuesday. I think the rain has stopped, at least in London, for the next 90 minutes, fingers crossed. We'll just give it a couple of minutes to let everybody in. Zoom likes to kind of throttle the amount of participants that can join. So we'll do this awkward filling of space for a couple of minutes. And then once the participants numbers stops jumping up, we'll kind of set out the agenda for today and what the session is going to include over the next 90 minutes or so. Whilst we're doing that, why don't we just do some quick intros from the hackajob team on the call. We'll save Tom for when we move on to his part shortly. But Daisy, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Daisy. I'm the marketing lead here at hackajob, and I run the team responsible for content, events, podcasts, webinars, just basically lots of kind of employer brand content strategy stuff. So really, really great to meet you all and looking forward to chatting more on the call later today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Daisy. And my name's Mark. If you've joined our Tech Recruitment Takeovers before, you've probably heard my voice, but I'm the co-founder and CEO here at hackajob, which means I get to wear lots of different hats depending on which hour of the day it is. And more recently, I've been wearing an employer branding hat, which will kind of take us into today's session. So I think we've kind of settled on the number of participants that are joining. So we'll jump into it. I will share my screen and outline a bit of an agenda for today's session. So for those that aren't aware, we started doing our Tech Recruitment Takeovers about 14 months ago. And what they are is a series of events that we run once a quarter. It started with a tech training fortnightly program that we ran for 750 recruiters in the first lockdown, which feels a lifetime ago now, and has evolved into different sessions that we've ran. Today, the big focus is on employer branding. We have a couple of special guests that are going to be talking through employer branding, as well as a new product launch from hackajob, brand by hackajob. Just some quick housekeeping rules before we jump into the session for today. So if you've got a question at any point throughout today's session, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. Sometimes questions can get lost in the chat function. So if we could keep all of the questions into the Q&A, that would be amazing. And we're going to have some dedicated time at the end to kind of chat through any questions. If you were one of the early signups to this and you then filled out a secondary form, you might have got a little special something in the post over the weekend. Mine clearly got lost, otherwise I'd be cheersing everyone right now. But as we are doing virtual events, Daisy and I had this image of everybody, you know, like an Apple keynote in a room somewhere, and we'd be giving out glasses of champagne as people entered. But given we're doing it remotely, we thought we'd send out some bubbles to people that registered early enough. So if you did get a little treat in the post from hackajob, feel free to crack it open. Bubbles are for drinking. And if you'd like any information post-event, it's all going to be recorded. We'll share it all afterwards. I know not everybody could make it in real time, but feel free to reach out to Daisy or myself. I'm sure Tom and the other speakers will be happy to be connected. So today's agenda, what are we going to be running through? So in a couple of minutes or so, we'll kick off our first fireside talk with Tom Portingale, and I'll let Tom give himself an intro shortly. We'll then be moving on to brand by hackajob keynote and demo that Daisy and myself will be leading. We'll then be joined by Josh Walker from Thoughtworks, who will be talking through Thoughtworks' approach to employer branding and how they were able to be an early adopter of brand by hackajob and some of the success they've had. And we'll be wrapping up with our final fireside talk with Nick Thompson over at IBM. Because of how Zoom webinars work, you may see people just jumping in as presenters and leaving as presenters throughout today. That's how Zoom works. So do not worry if you just see a new person appear on stage. That is designed, it is the way it's meant to be. And finally, what we're hoping you'll get from today's session is firstly why employer branding is critical for tech talent attraction in 2021. And I'm really excited to hear from Tom on his thoughts about how Nationwide have approached this. We're then going to be diving into brand by hackajob and how our new product and proposition is going to enable companies to attract technical talent. And then finally, we hope that there'll be some practical tips that you can take away and action today, whether that be at a more strategic level or some actual tactical advice that you can go away and implement. So with that being said, we will go into our first fireside chat of the day. So Tom, thank you so much. Welcome to another hackajob event. For those that haven't heard you speak before, Tom, why don't you give yourself a quick intro before we jump into today's content?
Sure, and thanks Mark, thanks Daisy for having me, and thanks everyone for taking time out on a Tuesday afternoon to join this session. So my name is Tom Portingale and I head up employer brand marketing at Nationwide Building Society. You're probably all quite familiar with Nationwide. We're a building society, not a bank, but we do everything that essentially a bank does. 15 million customers in the UK. Basically, we have a relationship with about 1 in 4 households. We're distinctly different because we are a building society. So we don't have shareholders. We're not necessarily about profit. We're driven more by social purpose. And that social purpose 170 years ago when the company was founded is exactly the rocket fuel that I try and tap into now from an employer brand sense to help convey Nationwide, not from a products and propositions point of view, but as a destination employer of choice. So that's probably the easiest, quickest, dirtiest intro description, Mark.
Fantastic, Tom. So let's get into it. So Nationwide are going through probably one of the largest digital transformation programs in the UK. I think that's fair to say. It's very public, the amount that is being invested in the digital transformation program at Nationwide, which I suspect means you're attracting new skills to the business, or certainly skills at a higher volume than what you would have done previously. And I'm sure that leads to hiring managers demanding roles to be filled instantly, and sometimes what can be a reactive model. How have you thought about developing an overarching strategy for employer branding at Nationwide versus the sort of reactive tactical channels that can sometimes be, what we reach for as TA professionals?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I've noticed, because I didn't necessarily come from the TA recruitment HR world, I come from a very different world, the consumer brand marketing space and PR space. But guess what? As I've said for a long time, the methodologies and the approach and the applied science are exactly the same. How you need to engage and warm up a consumer is exactly the same of how you need to engage and warm up and hopefully convert a candidate. So I think, what I really noticed was when we came in, so Nationwide a couple of years ago announced something called the Big Investment, which was a multi-billion-pound tech investment, £5.1 billion investment over 5 years into its technology estate. So a huge, huge commitment and a real signifier and change of direction to sort of reflect the digital world that we're now all in. So the challenge was, how do you take a really sort of traditional and quite well-known household brand, but it's got no equity, I guess, in the tech space? We're not a shiny startup in Shoreditch. We're not a fintech company per se, even though quite a lot of the stuff that we do and the innovations that the tech teams are driving are exactly the same as those entities. So the task for me was, before we start, as you said, the tactical bits, and I've said to you before about this, Mark, you cannot do anything but learn to start. Okay, so that's my first piece of advice. Put down the tactical toys. Stop thinking about job boards. Stop thinking about programmatic. Those things will come in time. Okay, but before you do anything, do nothing but learn. Okay, so for me, the diagnosis piece is really, really important. So really get under the skin. Thankfully, Nationwide's a company with lots of heritage. A very clear sense of direction from its founding fathers. Look back into the archives. That was something that we did, and then start looking, from a research perspective. That was really important for me. Loyalist research. So, what do people who have joined Nationwide, why did they join and why did they stay? But also all that secondary data out there. It doesn't take long to hide yourself in a room and do a Google search of everything on your company. Because trust me, people are writing about your company or saying things about your company, whether it's on Glassdoor or whatever. So the first and foremost piece is do that diagnosis bit. And you're going to have loads of pressure from hiring managers, loads of pressure from recruiters going, we need to do a campaign, we need to recruit, X amount of engineers. But put the tactical toys down. You have to do that diagnosis piece first.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is one of the biggest challenges, or, certainly one of the biggest challenges that teams face, right? Is I think we've seen it more so than ever recently, this utter demand that's come from nowhere because of the uncertainty over the last 14, 15 months, that all of a sudden there's, hundreds of vacancies open that need to get filled ASAP. And it can be very easy to go, right, let's go and turn on all our normal sourcing channels and just hope that we find the relevant candidates out there that are going to be a good fit for us. What when you went through that diagnosis phase at Nationwide, like you said, it is a business that's got 170 years history. It's got a lot of data out there. I guess, what were some of the key things that you found through that journey, and how would you advise maybe some of the newer companies that are listening to today that have maybe only got 5 or 6 years, of a story to tell? What does that diagnosis process look like and differ between the size of organizations?
Yeah, that's a good point. And most people that know me will know that I like to talk in sort of visual metaphors. So consider the diagnosis piece. Look, we're armies in a generals in an army now, rather. This is our battle map, okay? So, this is where we need to understand the coordinates in the area before we send the troops in, okay? So that's the diagnosis piece. We're at the top of the mountain and we're navel gazing down on the area where the battle's about to take place. Now, whether you're a big organization with, long-standing heritage like Nationwide, or you're a startup tech company, it doesn't matter. There is still heritage in your organization, and there are still founders. And I'd probably say that actually, if you work for a startup, chances are that founder is still part of the business. So instead of me, going back through the archives and listening to the likes of Arthur Webb, who were the CEO, for 60 years at Nationwide, who passed away years and years ago, you've got the chance of actually talking and actually having face-to-face, one-on-one time with your own founder. I mean, that's so powerful to understand what was the motivation for starting the business, okay? We really need to tap into what that heritage is. What was the vision of those founders or the founder of the organization? And as I said, even looking into the archives, and if there aren't any archive stuff, do the secondary data bit, because people will be saying stuff about you or writing stuff about you. What do customers say that, about the product that you're producing or the service that you're providing? So it's really important that you do that construct of the battle map, as I said, because if you can get that, the areas that you need to go in, and that, and essentially once you've done the diagnosis piece, guess what? That then leads into the strategic bit. And the strategy is really, really important. So don't forget, we're not at tactical part here, okay? So it's a really clear process. We start with the diagnosis, we then move into strategy, we then move into tactics, okay? That is basic brand management. And if you did a PhD in marketing, or you did an MBA in brand management, all of these things are applied principles, okay? So this isn't just me saying it, all right? And once you've done that brand diagnosis bit, that's really helpful, because the strategy is essentially, who are you going to target? And importantly, who aren't you going to target? You made the point, you can't go after everything. You can't, using the recruitment marketing cliche, spray and pray. It doesn't work in this day and age. So who are you targeting? What's your positioning? Okay, so that's essentially your meaning and your message. That, guess what, comes from the research that you did in the diagnosis. And then essentially, it's the assets that you then produce that help to tell that story, or codes as they're called. So those are the clearly defined proof points, that whether it's something that sits on your careers website, whether it's something that goes into your email marketing, whether it's your social media messaging, all of that comes from your diagnosis. And if you can get that bit right, guess what? An EVP, that's the first time probably we're going to be mentioning that today, but it's going to be mentioned quite a lot. Your brand anchor is your EVP in employer brand. But so many organizations tend to guess what their business out, not candidate in. And so by doing that diagnosis piece, when you get to the strategy, you can also get a good sort of barometer, bellwether as to whether your EVP is fit for purpose. And if you can get that right and you understand who you're targeting, you can clearly define those messages and the meaning of those messages, and then you can create the assets that go along that. You're going to hear from Nick later about some brilliant content hacks. You can then start thinking about the tactical toys that you can then start spreading that gospel.
Yeah, and before we get to the tactical toys, I want to drill into something that you mentioned that I think has come to light even more so over the last year, and that's about this idea that businesses now have to take a position. So, the last 14, 15 months have been obviously crazy for everyone from a COVID perspective, and fundamentally shifted the way we think about work and location. And I know Nationwide have gone with a sort of remote first idea across the UK, which might be interesting to explore. It'd be interesting to see if that's strategy or tactics or diagnosis and how you came to that. But there's also been a lot of other big global movements. Obviously, we saw the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement last year, and I believe it was the anniversary of George Floyd's death this week. And there's been a number of other really mass movements that have happened. And it's interesting now that we're starting to see businesses take a stance one way or the other, maybe more so than what they did previously. I'm sure for the crypto nerds out there, they would have heard of a business called Coinbase, which quite controversially towards the end of last year said no more politics at work. Like, we're not about solving all of the world's issues. We're about democratizing finance. And they said, if you don't want to be, in that environment, we'll pay you to leave for 6 months. And whether you agree with that or not, it's interesting now that businesses are taking a stance and are saying, this is what we stand for. How do you think about that, Tom, in this world where it seems that brand invisibility is just not an option anymore, where you've got to kind of stand up and take a side or have an opinion?
Yeah, I think what's been really clear over the last 14 months is since the pandemic, and then as we've moved into, the social impact of what's happened around Black Lives Matter, and then as we've moved in then to the future of work narrative, that hybrid working, that seems to be the buzz phrase that lots of people are using at the minute. What's been really clear is that those brands which have been stepping up have been the ones which have been standing out. Okay, so there's a marketing term that's called salience. Okay, salience is really simple. It's, if I go to a shop and I buy something, I think of a brand in that buying moment. Okay, and normally the brand that evokes those positive, warm feelings, guess what, is where I tend to put my hand on the counter in terms of what product I'm going to purchase, or I move my mouse cursor if I'm purchasing on Amazon or eBay. And that salience is no different with candidates. So candidates at the minute have an opportunity to think, where do I want to work, my next stage of my career, especially in the tech space. And, there's lots of organizations which have been doing great stuff from a social purpose, social cause perspective, have been helping their staff through the pandemic, have been driving innovation to support customers, and have been telling this story, okay? And that's really important because all of that produces salience, so that when candidates start thinking about what's my next career move, those brands which have been, been really unequivocal about their view on supporting, and getting rid of racial inequality, in terms of how they've been supporting their staff to work from home and empower them and to support their health and well-being, how they've been supporting their customers and during this process. And then as we've moved to future of work, the other side of COVID, how are employers supporting their staff to do the job no matter where their location is. Okay, so work is something that we do, not a place that we go. That's Nationwide's prerogative on it. And I think that you'll find that those organizations that have had quite a clear, unequivocal view on all of those subjects that I've spoke about will probably be the ones when we come out the other side of this period of time, which reflects better with candidates. And do you know what? Some people won't like it, and that's okay. Because when we talk about diagnosis and strategy and tactics, it's also, the audience is, who are we targeting, who don't we want to target? You can't go after everyone, and it's okay to be Marmite to some groups. That's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's got to be one of the really big takeaways from this, initial session from today, is that, it's okay not to appeal to everyone. You're much better appealing to that specific, niche or that audience that you want to go after. And even then, you're not going to be, every software engineer's cup of tea, or whatever audience that may be. Looking at it from a nationwide perspective, it's amazing. A business with so much heritage has taken quite a leading stance, on this future of work topic. It feels like Deloitte have been issuing future of work reports for the last decade, and it's finally come to fruition. Where in the process did that happen, Tom, for Nationwide to coin that brilliant phrase you just referenced there, and take this, we'll trust our employees to work anywhere? Was that in the diagnosis phase? Was that actually when you were looking at strategy and thinking, actually, how do we build a really compelling proposition to future employees and our existing employees? Or, the cynic in me is just from a tactical perspective, a recruiter says, well, it's much easier if you're UK wide than it is in Swindon and London to find candidates. So it could kind of fall into any of these buckets. How did it come about at Nationwide?
Yeah, and I guess the overarching point here, whether it's the future work strategy, whether it's your tech recruitment strategy, whatever it may be, one thing I said at the start: do nothing but learn. And that, involves listening. Okay. So one of the things that drove our future work decision at Nationwide that we announced at the back end of March was quite simply, we're going to talk to all of our staff. So we surveyed 13,000 of our staff that have been working remotely in the last 12 months to ask, what do you want? 6% said, I want to come back to an office full time. 56% said, I want to work from home full time. I don't want to come back into a Swindon, Bristol, London office. And then the rest, just over 35%, said, I want to blend between the two. So what we did, we took the internal survey learnings and then we overlaid that. I spoke about secondary data. What's really important is that any company now can use people like YouGov, to commission polls. If I was a small organization, I would use YouGov. We partnered with Ipsos Mori to run some research around 18 to 65-year-old UK adults on, what were their feelings around the future of work. And the feedback from the external research was very different. Gen Z, for example, said, I want to be in an office all the time because I'm missing those intangible benefits. I learn, I observe, I develop by watching people. I can't do that over 2D Zoom or Teams calls. But conversely, we had other older demographics of the external research saying actually the status quo of working from home suited them fine and the pace of life that they were looking to have. So naturally, our decision of what our future of work approach is based on qualitative and quantitative survey and research results. And that, guess what, helped to inform what the strategy was. And most importantly, what were the messages that we were going to deliver. So we had 6 commitments that we committed to as part of our future of work approach. So this was, for example, all roles will be location agnostic. I could be in Land's End or John O'Groats. It doesn't matter. I don't need to come to Swindon, Bristol, London. Work is what we do, not a place that we go. We had a commitment, for example, where yes, you could come into an office. That's absolutely fine. But if you were to have a meeting, everyone has to be in that meeting. If one person in your team says, I've got to work from home because I'm taking the kids to school or whatever it might be, then everyone has to be on Teams. Okay, so it's that democratization. And the commitments that we made were, commitments with a small c, because these will evolve over time. And future of work, guess what? It's no different to any other brand strategy. You test, you learn, and you iterate. But the most important thing is that you base that, you base the initial findings of your strategy from hard evidence, hard research, and that means listening and do nothing but learn.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, you've touched on so many interesting points there that I think are so useful at a very tactical level, but also quite at a strategic level. So I love the point around the democratization and the access point. It's something that we're looking at internally at the moment as we build our back to the office plan. But also that honesty around it's going to evolve, it's going to iterate. What people say in a survey may be very different to when they're back in an office in 3, 6, 12 months time. And it feels like we could do a whole nother session on how are people going to set up for a hybrid work environment. I feel that's a challenge that a lot of employers are facing right now. But given that we've got a couple of minutes left, Tom, you've painted this amazing framework for companies out there thinking about employer brands today around this diagnosis, then strategy, then finally you can get I love you call it the tactical toys out. If you had to leave the audience with anything today, what would be that message, and how do you think about taking the business on that journey of going from diagnosis to then strategy to then finally tactics, which may take a little bit slower initially to then run faster later on?
Yeah, and it's not an easy process. It's the hardest thing is to say no to overpressurized hiring managers or recruiters who are saying, we need bums on seats, we need a team of X amount now, we've got a project starting soon, help, pull rabbits out of a hat. So the most important thing with this is that everything is based on fact, not fiction, okay? So if you can ring fence that time, in my experience, a good diagnosis period to creating a strategy to then developing the tactical tools takes about 6 months, okay? When should you start that? Ideally, you should start the diagnosis at the end of a financial year, okay? And that's important because you need time to come up with what's your business case ready for the new financial year, okay? So you talk about the internal sell. A brand strategy is going to mean something different to your CFO, who's going to go, how much do you need to activate this, whether it's all the research or whether it's the tactical assets and stuff that you need producing, or the inventory, the media that you're going to need to purchase. Likewise, you might have a head of HR that says, what does this mean for the business if we spend X amount? So you've got to bear in mind the stakeholders that you're dealing with, or don't just throw everything at them. When you've done your brand diagnosis and you've created the strategy and you've got your tactical tools, you don't verbatim need to take all of those stakeholders through. Think about who they are, what's their role in the business, and what bit do they want to know, okay? So what I'd probably say is it will take about 6 months. Really try and be strict with yourself to be able to do that. And most importantly, work with what you've got. I'm conscious there's lots of people on the call who aren't a nationwide, or like Nick with IBM later, the small startups. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't take these same processes and apply them. In fact, I'd probably say it might be even slightly easier to be able to get this through and build advocacy internally of a brand plan and what it can actually do. But the reason why it's important is because once that's done, guess what? You then got a snapshot that you can then go back round in 12 months' time at the end of the next financial year, and you can say what worked well. And there's always this perennial question in employer brand of KPIs and metrics, okay? How can you quantify the success of employer brand? And quite often it's done through vanity metrics, okay? It's done through click-through rates, it's done through impressions, it's done through engagements. That stuff's a barometer, but that's not the hard evidence. It proves that what you're saying through your proposition is working and landing. So if you can do those bits at the start, in 12 months' time, you revisit it and you've got a base point in which you can then, guess what, test and learn, and then you iterate again.
Yeah, and just to emphasize that final point, and I think maybe Tom will get you back onto another session at a later date around the ROI on brand, because I think it's probably one of the hardest things for recruitment teams and TA functions to wrap their head around. But click-through rate and impressions is probably not going to build the business case that you need to get some of the budget signed off to do some of the more fun tactical toys pieces. So Tom, thank you so much for that insight and that amazing framework. I think that really gives people listening something to be able to take away with them today. If you've got any questions for Tom or anything specific that you'd like to know, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I think Tom's going to jump off at some point today, but if we can't get to them with Tom, I'm sure we'll be able to get a follow-up to you. So Tom, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And look forward to a part 2 where we can jump into some of these topics in more depth in the future.
No, it's a pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me. And like I said, if there's any questions, fire them through to the Q&A, reach me on LinkedIn. But yeah, I'm always here to try and help.
Amazing. Cheers, Tom. And now we're moving on to part 2 of today's session. So I hope Daisy's going to pop back off mute and join us again, which is fun. This whole Zoom interaction, it's weird. You know, if we were in a room right now, we'd give Tom a standing ovation. You know, hopefully people found that super useful. But we'll move on to the next part of today's session, and I will reshare my screen. So what we are now going to go through, and if we did send you anything nice in the post before this session, then I feel like now's a great time to get it out, is Brand by hackajob, and what is the new product and proposition that we're launching today. So I'm going to kind of run through it at quite a high level initially and kind of talk through why we've decided to go down this route with our product strategy. And then Daisy's actually going to bring it to life and share some real examples that a few of our clients have been lucky to work on over the last 6 months or so. So if we jump into it, and a lot of this is going to pick up from what Tom's already talked through, so it leads in really nicely. But historically, when we've thought about TA as a function, you know, typically our approach to recruitment has been, you know, companies are the center of the universe. We can, you know, apply for or post roles out there, and we'll generate enough applicants, and you know, be able to fill roles in a really easy way. And whilst this still might be true for some functions, in the world of tech, it is way more competitive. And we know, and I'm sure everyone knowing on this call knows, that tech candidates have a lot more choice about where they work. And I think the last 14, 15 months has only accelerated that, with more companies going through bigger digital transformation programs. I know our team at hackajob are inundated with companies at the moment who are looking to really ramp up their hiring within tech. And it's not just tech companies. We're now seeing companies of all industry looking at growing out big tech functions. And so this is going to create a ton of new challenges for organizations. Some of these challenges have been here for the last 5-6 years, for sure. Some of them might be slightly newer. But you know, I don't need to go through these challenges one by one on the screen, but we know that when we're direct sourcing for technical talent, there are much lower response rates than on previous or on other job roles. We know it takes a long time to hire. We know there's a big challenge around diversity and inclusion within the tech sector. So in our opinion, we need a holistic strategy for tech recruitment. And this is exactly what Tom was saying. We think that you can't just turn on a sourcing channel and expect it to work. Actually, it's super important that you start with that diagnosis point that Tom was talking about, where you start with insights, you understand your market, you understand, is what you're even hiring for feasible? You know, are you looking for a senior DevOps engineer in Middlesbrough? Well, if you are, how many actually exist? And only then, when you understood the market, can you actually go out and build that employer brand and that proposition for why an engineer should want to interview with your company when they can go and interview with 10 other different businesses. And once you've got your brand and your proposition, it's at that point you can start the direct sourcing on channels like hackajob and other channels. And then obviously you need to build a really great assessment process and retention. Not going to touch too much on those topics today, but to us, this is really important. And we want to work with organizations across this whole strategy. We're not interested in just being a tactical sourcing channel. So what are we? Well, I'm pretty sure everyone on this call will know hackajob and will probably know us for our sourcing solution. It's what we've built a great reputation for over the last few years, and it's what the majority of our clients use us for today. But there are a few other bits to hackajob that people maybe don't know about. We've got a great insights platform, given the volume of candidates we have on the platform. And we do have a called assessments platform as well, but that's not really the focus today. Today, we want to focus on the new rollout of Brand by hackajob. And what is Brand by hackajob? We've said it about 12 times already in the 35 minutes we've been on this call today. But what we are proposing with Brand by hackajob is the ability for companies to build integrated multi-channel attraction campaigns specifically focused on a technical audience. So this is how we envisage the candidate journey in a Brand by hackajob ecosystem. The first port of call, and this is assuming you've done the insights and the diagnosis points. We're now on to, we know what the strategy is, we know what the EVP is, we're going into tactics. So at that point, you want to tell your story to the largest audience of passive engineers you can. And this isn't about getting a job applicant today or tomorrow. This is about educating the market on why they should come and work for your organization, whether that means you're one of a high growth tech startup, or maybe you're one of the largest building societies in the UK. You want to be able to tell your story to a passive audience. You then want to be able to build talent pools from that passive audience. So maybe candidates that are engaging with your brand through different events or podcasts or online articles or whatever it may be. And you want to be able to nurture those talent pools. So this is taking a much longer time zone or time perspective on the recruitment focus. We're not looking at, like I said, something that can generate candidates tomorrow. We're looking at a more holistic strategy that can meet our demand over a long time. And then once you've nurtured that talent pool, eventually these candidates are going to be like, oh, maybe I'm interested in working at this company. And that may take a push from you to say, you know, I wanted to reach out. I know you've been engaging with a lot of our content. You know, here's some more stuff for you to look at. If you're interested, I'd love to have a chat to you about roles. Or you may see an increase in candidates actually applying to you because you've spent and invested time in building a proposition and showing them why they should come and work for you. And what's amazing is this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So once you start creating content and you actually put more and more out there into the market, it's not going to just increase your engagement on a platform like hackajob. It will increase your engagement across all channels, whether that be a LinkedIn, whether that be a Reddit, a GitHub, whatever it may be. Your engagement rates are going to go through the roof. And like Tom said, we then need to learn, test, iterate, and go back through that process all over again and continue to move our message forward to make sure we're staying relevant to an audience. So this is how we imagine a candidate journey. But what actually is it? What are we actually doing with Brand by hackajob? Well, there are two work streams that we are helping companies with. On one side, it's content creation. And I think one of the biggest challenges organizations face when they think about how to create content in an employer branding setting is they think that it needs to be super high production, super high cost, and potentially don't have the time or the bandwidth to do it internally. And I'm not going to steal too much of Nick Thompson's thunder later on today, but I'm sure Nick's going to bring tons of valuable insight on that. And then the second pillar is actually content distribution. And this may be content that you've created with us and our team. It may be content that already exists, you know, on various different channels out there, whether it be something from your career site, maybe it's a great Glassdoor review, maybe it's an open source project on GitHub or something like that. And we want to enable companies to actually be able to distribute that content to our audience, which we'll come on to in a second. So if we zoom in on the content creation side of things, I think the key thing to emphasize, and we've got some examples beneath this, is with Brand by hackajob, our team will do all of the heavy lifting for our organizations and our clients. So you do not need a big internal team that can spin up event after event or podcast after podcast. We've got that team internally who are experts in their fields, and they will work with your team on doing all of that heavy lifting. And a couple of different elements of the content that you'll be able to create through Brand by hackajob. One is our online event series that if you follow us, you've probably seen us do a lot of over the last 6 months. And what we'll do here is partner with your organization to build a technical talk that's really relevant to what you're working on. And on average, we're seeing around 200 to 250 engineers join and watch the session for an hour. So a really high engaged audience. And I'll let Daisy talk about this in a little bit more depth later, but we have a brand new engineering podcast launching in a few weeks. And again, clients that are using Brand by hackajob will be able to be featured on that podcast, again, telling their story from an engineering perspective and sprinkling in a few recruitment tips along the way. We run a series of online coding competitions for our clients. Great if you're hiring for software engineers at scale and you're looking at a smart way to sift out potentially really strong candidates for your organization. And you can't forget about good old-fashioned blog posts. Daisy's got some great stats on them later, but it's incredible how an audience like ours still wants to read blog posts and still wants to consistently learn. So this is some of the things that clients that are utilizing Brand by hackajob will be able to get and utilize from our team, where we will pick up all of the workload and produce a lot of really awesome content for you. And then once that content's being created, the more important thing is distribution and how you actually get that in front of. And I think something that's really powerful around the proposition that we're launching today is our clients will own all of the IP from the content that we produce. So we're not saying that the content that we create for you, whether it be a podcast, an event, a blog post, an online challenge, has to exclusively be used on hackajob. You can share this across all of your social media channels, whether that be Twitter, LinkedIn, whether you're doing some cool things on Reddit or Discord. You can use it on your other sourcing channels, instead of reaching out with, your classic, hey, this is our tech stack, do you want to interview with us? Why not share a podcast with your head of engineering and say, listen to what we're working on. If it's of interest, let me know and we can have a conversation. By using the content that we'll create for you, you can increase your engagement rates across all of your different channels. But the one thing that you will get on hackajob, and the one thing that is going to be a really powerful asset for our clients, is a brand new landing page that is purely focused on your technical EVP, or as Sam and the team likes to say, your IVP. So employee value proposition is normally why someone should come and work for your organization. Actually, when we look at an IVP, it's why should a specific segment of the workforce come and work for your organization. And for engineers, that's probably a different reason than it is for salespeople or for somebody else. And we want to be able to enable you to have a dedicated page where you can tell all of your story, specifically focused on your tech EVP, and we'll let Daisy jump through that in more detail slightly later. So that's kind of what Brand by Hackajob is, this duo of content creation that we can do for you and content distribution that you'll do on Hackajob, but also across other channels. But when you are distributing content on Hackajob, we wanted to kind of share some stats around our audience and what that looks like. So over the last 6 years that we've been running Hackajob, we've now built a community of around 210,000 technical candidates across the UK. And one of the most powerful things about Hackajob is that all of the data we collect is structured data. So we don't use CV parsers where you have to gamble on keywords in a CV or anything like that. Actually, everything that we collect on an engineer, on one of our candidates, is structured in a database that enables us to query it. And this means we've got over 50 data points that we can use to target engineers, ranging from quite basic stuff like job titles and what skills they've used commercially, to some quite cool stuff for a specific subset of our clients, like their eligibility to get security clearance, to stuff that just helps recruiters save time around visa status, desired locations, etc. We can also, and we do collect gender data on our audience, and I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. We've got some really interesting projects we're working on in the D&I space, alongside some more of the technical information around an engineer. So on Hackajob, candidates can come on and complete online coding challenges, where we collect that where they rank in the community in their specific area, their seniority, and we can use all of this to target engineers for your brand attraction campaign. And if we dive into the skill sets in a little bit more detail, we use the phrase engineers at Hackajob a lot, but we don't just do software engineering. We are bigger than that, and we can basically help companies hire across any of the tech functions. So while software engineers do make up about half of our community, we've got a great talent pool across data science and data engineering. DevOps is a huge growth area, and all of the kind of subset roles that's now including, whether it be the little bit more legacy sysadmin, whether it be more site reliability engineers, or what we're seeing more recently is our ML ops roles, which are really, really interesting, very niche positions. To other functions within your product organization, whether that be your QA and test function, whether it be product and design, whether it be the architects or management roles. So the idea being is not only can you run attraction campaigns, but you can do it to target pretty much every area within your tech function. And we can also help companies hire across all seniority. Predominantly, companies use Hackajob to hire in that mid to senior spot. It's typically where we see the biggest pain point for companies, and I think that's reflected in the roles that get added to the system. But more recently, we've started helping companies hire a lot more in the grads and early career space, especially looking at it from a D&I lens, because actually the gender breakdown and the representation generally is much better and much more balanced at an early careers level than it is at some of the more senior level. So not only can we do every job function within the product and tech team, we can also look at it from every seniority in that function as well. And again, this is all looking at it from an attraction campaign perspective. And then the final point that we wanted to bring up today is the gender piece. And diversity and inclusion is so much more than gender, and it's really important that I say that, because I know everyone at hackajob firmly believes that, and we are in the process, and we're very close to having statistically significant data across ethnicity, neurodiversity, sexuality, disability, and a couple of other categories. But right now we have it on gender, and we've always been very proud of our stats that we are much better than the industry average. If you look at the latest stack report, which is probably the best indicator for the number of engineers in the UK, around 9% of software engineers specifically are female in the UK, which is obviously shocking and something that we need to address over a longer time zone. But because we are looking at candidates across the seniority, we do have a significantly higher percentage of female engineers on hackajob than the industry average, though it's still not 50%. So we've still got a lot of work to be done. And we're really excited about partnering with our clients to make that change over a longer time horizon. So right now, companies running new attraction campaigns in the Brand by hackajob launch will be able to target around gender. And over time, there'll be more D&I metrics that people can build attraction campaigns in. So hopefully that kind of gives a little bit of an overview of what we're trying to achieve with Brand by hackajob. But what I was really keen to do is just give an example of what a 12-month campaign would look like. And I think the key thing here is our team are going to produce all of these assets for you. So, we'll start off with creating a really great landing page and making that really compelling. And then we jump into whether it be a series of online events, whether it be coding competitions, podcast features, blogs, whatever it may be. And we'd build this out over a 12-month period so that you are maximizing your engagement at different touch points throughout your financial year or throughout your headcount to ensure that you're putting the right levers at the right moment to generate that attraction. So that is what we're doing with Brand by hackajob. But enough of me talking. I will stop sharing my screen and let Daisy actually show what you guys are going to be able to do.
Thanks, Mark. Awesome introduction there to Brand by hackajob. And yeah, I guess it's time for me to really put the proof where the pudding is and show everyone on the call today a demo of what our kind of branding looks like and how we can really help your organisations in terms of standing out to technical talent. So if I share my screen, Mark, can you see my screen? Perfect. Okay. And you can just see my screen, right? I'm just checking.
Yeah. Nice hackajob landing page.
Amazing. Yes. So welcome to Brand by hackajob. This is the home of your individual hub for all of your personalized content that you want to share with those who matter most in terms of everyone who's on the call today. That is obviously tech talent. So for the purposes of today's demo, I'm going to be sharing with you our own hackajob page that we have built using content that we have created for our clients. And before I get started, I really just want to, reiterate this is a reminder that all of the content on these pages is modular, and you definitely don't have to include as much as we have. We just wanted to show you the range of content that we have on offer and are able to create for our Brand by hackajob users. These pages are also fully customizable in the sense that you can kind of order the content in any which way you choose. So at the top, as you can see, we've got scrollable images as well as your brand name and a short summary. And from there, when you scroll down, you can see that we have, a longer introduction to hackajob, and you can display this text in a variety of ways. You can have different images, whatever you prefer, but for today's session, we just chose to display it like this. And you'll also notice that as I scroll down the page, the nav bar will come with you. So essentially what that means is, it's fully, it will come with you. And so essentially you can kind of click and go to a different section. So if I go to stats, I'm right here on the stats section. So if I start with our core stats, you can incorporate as many of these as you'd like to share about your organisation. For today, we just chose to go with 4. So we chose to go with our gender split here at hackajob, the number of employees we have, the industry that we work in, and the year that we were founded. But we have the ability for you to go completely bespoke with this, choose as many as you'd like, and go really granular with your organisation to make it entirely unique to you. As I scroll down further, you can also see our tech stack. This displays icons, names of languages and frameworks, and also how much we use it. So this is the languages and frameworks that we use here at hackajob, for example. And if you look in the front end column here, you can see that we use Angular, JavaScript and TypeScript the most. However, we do also dabble with React and Next.js as well. We love this section because it really showcases what your company does and the tech that you're working on in a very digestible format. So it's just great for people who land on this page to be able to see exactly who you are, the kinds of things they could be working on already from the get-go, and being able to have that initial understanding. Then from there, I'll move into our content section. And as I said previously, you can really choose to add as little or as much content as you'd like. But we think personally that in order to stand out to your audience, the more content you want to share, the better. And, you might be thinking, where on earth am I going to get all this content from? I don't really do video, whatever. But Nick Thompson, who's speaking later, will be sharing some great tips on how you can really get started organically creating content. So please make sure to watch his Fireside chat and ping us any questions that you might have. But also my team and I, obviously this is what we do. This is part of the Brand by hackajob process. We help create content on your behalf and then give you this channel so you can distribute it, as well as distributing it ourselves within our own channels. So if you're stuck or you have any questions, like I say, just give us a ping and we can help you. So on this page, you can see that we've started with video content, specifically our Lunch and Learn style webinars that are perfect for showcasing your organisation to these kind of tech audiences. But we'd also recommend something like, Thoughtworks in 60 seconds, for example, and really kind of grabbing somebody's attention from the get-go. You simply click play and it will play even on the page. But you also have options. So obviously we've just embedded this from YouTube, for example, so we can play full screen, watch it on YouTube, share it, or watch later. But we also have the ability for you to upload video as well, so you don't have to embed it from YouTube or Vimeo, for example. As I scroll further down, you can see the past events that we've run previously. So if I click, for example, see more on this event that we ran with Beauty Pie, we're taken to the website page. So on YouTube, for example, so you can see the event, you can see the start of it, and people actually get straight on there. You could link them to anywhere though. So you could also link them to a landing page where you had information about the event, for example, if you chose to do so, or a blog post or something like that. And as you can see on here, you can display the date of the event, some information about it. And again, they've got the option to play the video live there and kind of listen or watch at their leisure as they still stay on this distribution channel of yours. Then as I make my way further down the page, you also have the option to share any upcoming events. So as you can see, we have 3 webinars on the way that my team and I are running in June on behalf of some of our clients. So we have an event with Raytheon, we have an event with Discovery Direct to Consumer, and also the Financial Times as well. So in these sections, again, it's simply a case of, having a nice kind of image asset for your event, the title, some text about the event, but also obviously the date and time when it's going to be taking place, time zone as well, and a link to register. So if we click through on this Raytheon event, for example, you can click right through, you've got more information about the event, and you've got the opportunity to register for it as well. So these sections are really great because, again, you get the opportunity to share your organisation and what you're doing, but in a really kind of softer way. So it's not just about, oh, you should come and have a job with us. It's actually meet the team. Here's why you should have a job with us. Here's what, the people who you actually could be working with are saying about us. So going further down, we also have a section for podcasts. And I must say as well, like personally, are you utilising podcasts in your organisation? If you're not, you definitely should be, as they're a really great distribution channel to really get your message across. And we know that from speaking to candidates on our platform directly, they really enjoy engaging with content by listening as well as watching. They're really easy to record and you really don't need a lot of fancy equipment to get going. In fact, the more raw and real, the better. When we actually started the Tech Recruitment show in the first lockdown, we had plans to have all this fancy equipment in our office. We had a soundproof room, for example, we have mics, we had sort of everything set up. But, the pandemic didn't pan out that way. But it's super easy to get going, to record material and then actually get it edited easily. So yes, if anyone has any questions on podcast marketing, again, please feel free to get them in the Q&A, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions later today. We featured 2 of our podcast episodes on here from the Tech Recruitment Show. So the Tech Recruitment Show is HackaJob's B2B podcast. It's by tech recruiters for tech recruiters speaking about the wider industry. But we've also sharing a super sneak peek of our brand new candidate-facing podcast, which is part of Brand by HackaJob, Eat, Sleep, Code, Repeat. And this features engineers on it from lots of different organisations who will be sharing their experiences, what it's like, starting in engineering versus where they are now. So yeah, super exciting. And that will be coming very soon. So that's a super sneak peek of some content that we've got coming up. And again, if you'd like any information, feel free to ping us and ask. So on this, you can see a summary of each episode. And for example, if I was to click play on this episode, I'd be taken to Spotify. So we've just linked to Spotify, but you can link to any kind of podcast player that you prefer, and you can see the episode ready to go. Then as I scroll down even further, we also have included blogs on our page. So blogs are a really great way to obviously resonate with your audience. And I really wouldn't discount the power of a blog. So for example, on our HackaJob blog, we get over 3K views a month in traffic, and that is organic traffic as well. So really don't discount the kind of power of the written word. What we do on our blog is we feature a lot of tech tutorials that really resonate with obviously the candidates in our community. So that's great for us. And we would really recommend you do the same. And something that with Brand by HackaJob you can do is, we can work with you on articles and blogs and create content either with your engineering team or on behalf of your engineering team that you can then use our blog as an extra distribution channel to share that with your audience. So as you can see, we featured 3 different kinds of blogs on here. So we've got one that's on OAuth, one on Go, and one on Java. So, you can include how long this article will take to read, title, bit of a summary, nice image. And then again, if you click more, you're taken straight through to the blog on HackaJob. If I go down even further, we have included a section on your benefits. Again, just as a reminder, obviously we've put this nearer the bottom because obviously for us, this is a demo and we're showcasing more of the content side of things, but you can absolutely move things around, have more of them, bring them nearer to the top, or not include them at all if that's not what you want to do. So we've chosen 4 benefits to include today. So for example, at HackaJob, we get 23 days holiday with an extra day per year for every year that you work. And we now also offer the option to work from abroad as well. We also, staff can receive an annual bonus. We have team socials, obviously taking place virtually at the moment, and team lunches on the house. And every new starter receives shares in HackaJob. But again, this is a really nice way to display actually, if somebody came and worked at your organisation, what they would get in return. Something that is super exciting that we're really, really pleased with is our locations matcher. So, obviously right now, a lot of us are working remote, but people do want to know, when I go back to work, what is that going to look like? Are you having a hybrid working policy? Do you still have offices? How will I get there? That kind of thing, very kind of standard. So here for us, we've made it so that candidates are able to look at their potential commutes. So we've got our 2 offices on here. So we obviously have an office in London, but we also have an office in Iași in Romania as well. So if I type in a postcode, this is not my actual postcode office, and I click search and I look at the London office, I can view my route. So I can see how many miles it will take, obviously the time it will take as well, and essentially where I'm going to go through. So if I zoom in on the map and stuff, for example, I can see it in more detail and kind of work out, okay, how am I going to get to HackaJob's London office? So yeah, it's just a really nice feature for candidates to be able to kind of get that scope on where you're based and what that would look like. Speaking of remote working, we have included a section for you to be able to add your remote working policy. I think it's really important to be clear and transparent on this. We are getting a lot of questions internally, our wider team are, from people, what is it going to look like? And like I say, they really want to know what the situation is now, how are they going to work now versus how that is going to be in the future. So you have the option to be able to add that on this page, so you can be completely transparent with people from the get-go. And finally, we've also included steps for your interview process as well. Again, this can be as granular and as detailed as you like, or as low touch as you like, really whatever you prefer. So this is the interview process for internal roles at hackajob. So step 1 would be an application review. So where we look at somebody's skills and we'd match them to some of the internal roles that we have on offer. Obviously, we're a skills-based matching platform, and that applies internally for us as well. Step 2 would be an introductory call with a member of the wider team. Step 3 would be a hiring manager call where they would get to meet, the hiring manager for the role, ask lots of questions back and forth, the usual. I'm aware that I'm, on a call with many people who work in recruitment, so they don't need me to tell me how to recruit, because obviously I'm not a recruiter. And then step 4 would be to meet the team. And so, yeah, this is just a super simple snapshot of Brand by Hackajob. And like I say, we do content creation and distribution. So as part of being a Brand by Hackajob user, not only do you get access to this page, but you get access to a wealth of content that we would create on your behalf as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, because I'm actually just about to speak to one of our clients who uses Brand by Hackajob. So we've got Josh Walker on the line. Hi, Josh.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm enjoying some building work in and around the local vicinity today, but pleased to be speaking to you.
Perfect. So I guess to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about Thoughtworks and the work that you do there?
So Thoughtworks is a global software delivery consulting business, known very much for its culture, for its technology excellence, and my role is recruiting lead in the UK.
Perfect. And so I think to kick us off, why don't you start by telling us, why is employer brand so important to Thoughtworks?
That's a great question, Daisy. Employer brand is super important to us. It impacts both on business growth by influencing our candidate and our employee lifecycle. So our main focus is to foster a vibrant community of diverse and passionate individuals, technologists, and nurture, a steady stream of folk who are qualified and destined to be thought workers, whether they know that yet or not.
Amazing. And then how has hackajob helped with your employer brand?
Immeasurably. I think you work quite closely with Laura, who supports us from a recruitment marketing perspective, but it's enabled us to connect and engage with a new community of kind of technical practitioners. We've a pretty devoted following at Thoughtworks, and we run multiple conferences and events ourselves. However, we kind of find it hard to create recruitment partnerships that focus not only on generating new leads, but that represent our brand whilst delivering exciting content to kind of a broader audience.
Perfect. And then how many new people are engaging with Thoughtworks from the activity that we've done with you so far?
Yeah, so we've had 150 people attend the two online events so far, with another one coming up at the end of June, which didn't showcase on the three earlier. But 76% of those event attendees are interested in job opportunities at Thoughtworks. And I would add that I'm pretty fortunate to work in a company that recognises that you can't quantify every touch point. If we look at our own technology radar, a publication that we're well known for, not every person who reads it becomes a client, but we recognize it talks to our technology footprint. And whilst the numbers above are great, and we're really pleased with what hackajob is supporting us with, we do recognize that people talk, and if it speaks to the type of people we want to hire, the justification on spend is pretty easy.
Amazing. And then finally, what more would you like to be doing with us in the future?
Well, as a team, we're looking for scalability that sits outside of just adding heads. So how can we be more efficient, optimized both regionally and globally? And these types of partnerships with yourselves, they have a cost, but they also improve our capacity as individuals to deliver as a recruiting function. So I think we're really looking at things like exploring other areas of content, your podcasts that you mentioned, other avenues to kind of reaching people that we perhaps haven't been able to before in new and exciting ways. And, you're leading the way on that. So appreciate you helping us explore different ways to connect with folk.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for hopping on, Josh, and thank you for your time. I mean, feel free to stick around if you'd like, totally up to you, but I will pass back over to Mark now for his second Fireside chat.
Nice one. See you.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you so much, Daisy, as well. And yeah, hopefully everyone so far has found that interesting and engaging. And we move on to our final Fireside chat of the day to round up today's event. With the one and only Nick Thompson. So Nick, for those that aren't aware, those very few people on the call that don't know who Nick is, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction?
You make it sound like I post and do far too much already, Mark. So thank you for that lovely introduction. So I lead the talent marketing employer branding team here at IBM. And it's my role and my team's roles to deliver a message to hire just a few technologists each year across IBM, going into the tens of thousands across hundreds of countries as well. So quite a big challenge, quite a big ask, quite a big unlearn and relearn that we're trying to do with our audience.
Amazing. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really, really excited to get stuck in. I think one theme that's gone throughout the session today is content creation, and we heard about it from Tom at the start. You know, Daisy and I touched on it myself as well. I'm really keen to hear about how you're thinking about content creation in 2021. You know, do we need the big high budget campaigns? Do we need more organic content? Where's your head on this at the moment?
I just feel there has never been a lower barrier to entry in creating content as 2020 and 2021. Look at the content that people are engaging in, looking at what they're doing. I mean, there's a fair few people sat on this call, this recording right now. Outside of 2020 and 2021, this would have been a big flash event. You'd have hired a venue, we'd have traipsed to London, there'd be lights and everything else going on. But nobody is like, oh, I feel robbed. Like this wasn't at the Grosvenor on Park Lane or something like that. Like we've adapted and we've changed what we do. And like I quote Gary Vee a lot, and I know Tom does. We've had a lot of conversations around Gary Vee. Like Gary Vee runs VaynerMedia, and they're very successful kind of B2C and kind of consumer marketing agency. And he quotes that to strive for perfect content is to hide inequities in what you're trying to do. It's basically you're trying to compensate for something you can't ever get to. YouTubers, look at the content they produce. Like these are people with millions and millions of subscribers. Content is so easy. Like we all have a smartphone. We can therefore all produce content.
Yeah, love it. And you touched on kind of 2020 and 2021, and you're quite right. You know, Daisy and I were gutted that we couldn't rent out, you know, a nice fancy venue and give everyone a glass of champagne on arrival. But, you know, it has fundamentally shifted, you know, our thoughts around work. We heard from Tom earlier around nationwide, you know, remote first policy across the UK. You know, how are you thinking about the proposition for IBM, you know, in this lens moving forward? You know, how has that evolved through the last 18 months and kind of what's your advice to businesses whilst thinking about this?
So the biggest thing on this, and kind of specifically talking about employer branding, is like what you had in 2019. I cases of what you had in 2019 is working today. But more importantly, I don't think in 2022 and 2023 onwards, I think we're going to see, we need to create things that work for the moment and work for now. We have this remote, we have this hybrid approach, we have this kind of half in, half out office. I think over the years, we'll see that change. And I am sad to say, I think we will see ourselves going back to offices in the future. There's too much money in buildings and offices for us not to be there. But don't create something for 5 years' time. Don't create something for 5 years ago. Create it for now, adapt it, update it, and keep it fresh, keep it relevant. Like, don't shout about those lovely table football rooms that you have in your office if no one's in an office anymore. Like, nobody cares anymore. Like, talk about the culture and the environment and how people are supported in person, virtually, or in a hybrid approach, because that's what we want, is support and network and connections.
Yeah, and you know, that support and connections piece is really interesting in this remote lens, right? Because just naturally, by us being on Zoom, you know, I can suddenly see a little bit more about you, your background. You know, I always get, you know, picked on for this glass staircase. It looks way too fancy. And, you know, it's interesting that actually creating content in a remote first world, you know, enables us to be a lot more authentic. And I feel like every time you and I talk, we end up talking around authenticity and how powerful that can be for brands when they are telling their story. You know, how are you thinking about authenticity when we're producing content in this remote first world, and for when, you know, quite quickly in the UK at least, we will be back into offices, you know, fingers crossed, when June the 21st, 22nd comes, if restrictions will be lifted. You know, how does authenticity play into this world we're in at the moment?
Yeah, and authenticity is everything. And I know, Mark, we've spoken about the Edelman report, and honestly, I urge anybody and everybody to go look at the Edelman report. It comes out every single year. It's a trust barometer, not just around recruitment and what we do, but around society and the world that we're living in from a global and a local lens. And it's got to be authentic. Like, our BS radars have never been so prevalent as they are right now. Like, the Edelman report basically says trust has just gone. Like, we struggle to trust anybody and everybody. I mean, for the first time ever in 20 years of that report, we trust government officials has gone up. It's gone up to slightly less negative numbers than it was before, but it hasn't gone into the positive space. And people, you can't do anything more authentic than this and what we're doing now, Mark. And again, we've spoken before around, like, your house is your castle. Like, it isn't just where you live, it's your safety zone, it's your friends, your family, your loved one. It's where you go and where you're safe. Everybody is now coming into everybody's homes. So we are showing sides of us that we've never shown before. And that's the authenticity. Like, the worry is you put a lovely backdrop on your Zoom video because you don't want to show your glass staircase. I think it's quite nice, but anyway. And then it becomes like, you lose that realness. It becomes staged. It becomes CGI. Do I buy into you? Am I getting it? And with content, let people say it in their voice. Right? I always use the analogy of kind of, think of the press release and think of kind of news conferences. There isn't a single microphone there. There's multiple microphones. And everybody needs to have multiple microphones in their organization. You can't just have a single. But also, if that doesn't help, not everybody is a Manchester United fan. So if all you're producing is the Manchester United content, great. Those that like it will love it and they'll buy it all and they'll love it all. Those that support another team will hate that content and it just won't resonate with them. So if you're producing content, look at what you do and make sure you're representing the whole of the football leagues and not a single team, because you'll be repelling more than you attract in your audiences.
But if you are going to choose one team, choose Man United. For that person that just dropped into the chat, the report is the Edelman report. We'll make sure it's included in the follow-up post-event, because especially, you know, the one that's been released recently is fascinating on this concept of trust. You know, and fundamentally, if we're thinking about our employer brand and how we want to try and attract an audience, you know, it's a lot about trust. And I think, Nick, when we were discussing it a couple of weeks ago or last week, what was really interesting in the report is that people trust their peers and their colleagues more than ever.
Yep.
And as we think about building a tech EVP and a proposition that's going to appeal to engineers, there is nothing more powerful than getting engineers to speak to engineers and speak the language that,
yep,
you know, they talk about. I think it is absolutely critical that you do that. And our job as TA professionals is to facilitate those conversations, right? And be there to be able to support people through a journey. I think there's a couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A, and we can chat through them at the end as well in more depth. But I think one is very common that we get, which is, when we're talking about employer brand, where does it sit in an organization? And if I want to, maybe it's a smaller organization and I want to just go and produce some content. Maybe it's a bigger organization and there's very clear, marketing functions and resourcing functions. How do you get that buy-in from a marketing team that you are allowed to go and tell your story from an employee perspective, versus making sure everything goes through comms and PR and whatever it may be?
Yeah, and you're right, it varies massively from company to company. And there's also a bit of a journey that you need to go on. But the first thing I want to say to everybody is every single person is creating content today. And they're creating content, might not be written, might not be video, it's verbal. So when you speak to a candidate and the candidate says, why should I join your company? Tell me a bit about this, tell me something about that. That's content. That's what they want to know. So start with an FAQ section, start with those common questions that you get. And those good recruiters, clearly everybody, everywhere, has the response to them rather than like, yeah, you're right, it's rubbish here. And we just give up. Like, actually, did you know we do this? Did you know we do that? Did you know we do this? Did you know you can do this? You can do that. And what's in it for you is this. That's content. You're already producing it. Like, talk to your marketing teams, engage them and say, look, we're already producing this. I'd love to get your view, your spin, your polish on these things. But also, again, there's a shed load of reports out there that say companies that promote their culture, increase their values, because a customer doesn't want to buy from a robotic factory. They want to buy from a group of individuals. Tech space, tech's the enabler. People are the product. People make the difference to the tech. And when you're buying into a company, you want to know the people, you want to like the people, you want to understand the people. I often find in most situations and most companies I've worked at, Vodafone, IBM, the marketing team don't know how to tell that people story. They don't know how it fits with their product marketing roadmap. So they're actually welcome for you to come and talk to them about it. They normally add in a different lens and a different criteria and different links and different placements, but they're actually open and they want to talk about it. So have the conversations. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's how we're doing it. We need your support, marketing, PR, comms, press, whoever they're called, because the more of this we get, the more people we hire, which means the more people there are to deliver on what you're selling to our customers through your marketing. And then they realize their part is to support you and help you, because marketing's goal is growth. And whether that's growth through people that deliver, that sell, that execute, or customers that come and buy, it's growth.
Yeah, and the people part can sometimes get lost, when we're talking about all of the cool TA tech out there. And yes, I put hackajob in that category. Yes, we are, cool tech out there. Fundamentally, our job, as TA professionals is all about people, and it's about attracting people into the organization. And we don't necessarily get into too far into the detail on the treat candidates like consumers cliche that often comes up in these conversations. But you did say something very interesting when we were prepping for this session, Nick, which is that as TA professionals, 99% of the time we are rejecting people, and it's not nice to be rejected fundamentally, right? People do not enjoy that process generally, maybe unless you're, a frontline salesperson, you get rejected, day in, day out. But generally speaking, it's quite a challenging environment. So how do we think about employer brand? How do we think about creating a fantastic experience for candidates that might be consumers, when from 99 out of 100 candidates, it may end up being a no at the end of that process?
Yeah, and I love this. I'll try not to go on too much of a kind of a mind on this, but all of our processes, all of our experiences are created on the one. And as you say, like, that one is the one that got the job. So hopefully that one is happy because they got the outcome that they were aiming for. why not flip it on its head and try and cater for the 99 that don't get the job? Because again, think back to hotels, probably a bad analogy because we don't know what they are for the last 18 months, but think back to those analogies, or restaurants, that you go to a bad one, you tell more people than you do a good one. That's what your audience is doing. And I know the tech space is big and I know it's growing. It isn't growing at the pace that the demand from companies is driving. We all want developers, and there just aren't enough to go around. So you give a bad experience to one developer who, when they clicked apply, they've pictured themselves doing that job in 3, 6, 9 months' time. You've got to think this is the most emotive purchase that people make. Like, in this current climate, people aren't just wanting a bigger house, a bigger car, a bigger holiday, a bigger bank balance. Like, there are people who are unemployed, who are trying to keep a roof over their head, to provide for their friends, to provide for their family, and to have some self-esteem. Why do we not take any of that into consideration in anything we're doing? Like, candidate experience, employer brand, it's the same thing. It's how you treat people, and it's how they leave an interaction or an experience with your organization. And yes, telling them that it's hard work is fine. Not every company is a 9 to 5. Not every company is the easiest ride you've ever had. Some companies are hard. Some companies are long and difficult. Tell people that, because then when they apply, they're not surprised, they're not upset, they're not shocked that that's your culture or your environment. They knew it was coming and they prepared themselves. And if you as the individual decided X company wasn't the right one for me, rather than a recruiter, I'd like to say, sending you a rejection letter, we're still in a world where the reality is you were ghosted for long enough that you got the message yourself. That's not brand building. And it doesn't matter what content you do, what your website looks like, your socials. It's the easiest way to call BS on any brand and any experience.
Yeah, and like you said, it is remarkable that we are still in an environment where candidates do get ghosted, and it's, even after you maybe have done an initial interview, people still might not hear back. It's not just at the application review stage. We've had a ton of questions come in, and there's quite a lot around this idea of how do we build out ROI for employer brand? How do we justify employer brand internally? And justifying brand full stop's quite tricky. I can speak from somebody that signs off budgets to go out and build brand. It's a hard thing to justify. But when we are looking at big organization, small organization, and we're looking at putting together these attraction campaigns, what should be the ROI we're looking at? Is it measurable? Is it not? How are we having those conversations to get this signed off in the first place?
And that's really hard to give a simple cookie cutter single answer to it, because it does vary. There are some companies in hyper growth at the moment that just want awareness. They want future consideration. They want people to be like, oh, I've heard of company X. They're doing cool things. I want to be part of that in the future. And for them, it would be reach, it would be interaction, it would be awareness. It may be sign-ups to a talent network or something like that. But then there's also like a big driver for us is kind of organic traffic. Like, I want to get people typing into Google or whichever search engine, careers at IBM, and I want them coming to us. And that's a growth of our awareness, our brand, our reputation, and our power. If I go from 20% organic traffic to 40%, I'm like, this is great. People are typing us and finding us. But also use things like your LinkedIn talent flows and look at, where are you losing people to company-wide? Where are you gaining people from? If you've got a target of making, like, X company is your target company where you want to hire their devs or whatever it is, like, from the work you're doing, the brand messaging you're saying, the kind of, we're better than that company because of, you measure that by how many of those people engaged in a conversation with you. versus the last time you tried to speak to anyone and they ghosted you. Like, there's so many different things, but you've got to qualify what it is you're trying to do before you try and do something and then just grab a random number and go, we succeeded. Like, there's a million numbers that you can make it up. Just be honest with yourself about what is it you need and want to achieve on that, and how would you quantify that? What would success look like for you?
Yeah, I love the organic traffic one. It's actually how we think about it a lot, just internally, whether it be, and that's what's so interesting about a lot of this stuff, right? Is a lot of this is just general great B2C marketing advice. It's not necessarily specific to candidates. And when we talk about, you know, whether it sits within marketing or resourcing, well, actually your marketing function have probably already got some really cool B2C channels. So speaking to them and understanding, you know, what works and what doesn't already is very interesting. But I love the percentage of organic, you know, specifically related to the career side, because it shows that you are building that broad-based awareness, which actually can be really hard to quantify. I haven't heard too many organizations frame it like that. I think that's,
you've got all the others of your Glassdoor scores and the number of applies. I think as I've kind of detailed before, I don't see number of applies as a win. For me, the holy grail is one application to one hire. Don't worry, everyone on this call, I also hear the hiring managers going, I want a comparison to perfect. Like, they're perfect, but I want a comparison. But it shouldn't take 100 applications to make a hire. And actually that less is more, because that's 99 people you don't have to screen, you don't have to respond, you don't have to let down. And that gives you more time to do the value adds to the 5 or 10 that you did want to apply. You spend more time with them, or you get to work on all the other recs that were being landed in today's climate. So it's just about using your time in the right places.
And I think, you know, there is a lot of vanity metrics that we can look at to make ourselves feel good. I feel like candidate applications is the number one, right? It's like, oh yeah, great, we drove an extra 1,000 applications this month, or whatever it might be. But like you say, if it's not relevant, all you're then doing is rejecting 990 applications or whatever it is.
Yep.
It's not great. And even Glassdoor, right? You can quite often see where Glassdoor has been gamed, because suddenly out of nowhere, 50 reviews come on in 24 hours, you know, and things like that. So, you know, again, comes back to that authenticity. When we're actually looking at a campaign, what are we trying to move the needle on here? You know, I think makes a ton of sense. I'm conscious we're coming up to time, Nick. So, you know, you've got an engaged audience here that's eager to roll out an employer branding strategy, you know, and kind of craft that EVP. What would be your lasting message to them, you know, in this current economic and social climate we find ourselves in?
Just bloody do it. Like, stop planning. Don't spend the next year writing an amazing deck that then is not relevant for 2022. Just start. Like, agile and all of this is overused as an approach, but minimal viable product. If you as an organization are hiring 200, 2,000, 20,000 people, who are your highest hiring audience? So for example, you're hiring 50% software devs. Cool. Start with software devs. Start with those contents and those questions that you're always answering as a recruiter. Like, they're always asking, what's this look like? What's that look like? What tech stack am I working on? What it is. That's your brand message. Start by sharing that. Get people engaging in it. They start growing it. And so many people see a brand as like a once every 5-year thing. Like, no, it constantly changes. It constantly updates. It always needs to be refreshed and updated, and it needs to be current and modern. So just start. Like, just start. Make mistakes, fail fast, learn from those mistakes, and have some bloody good fun whilst you're doing it as well. Like, try the things that make you stand out. Like, bottle your secret sauce and promote it. Like, don't be bland. Don't do the same as everyone else. Put those weird and wonderful devs with pink hair, purple hair, everything pierced, like, get them on your content, get them sharing it, because that's what people want to see, that there's life behind the stock photos on your website and your brand.
think have fun with it might be my big takeaway from today, especially in, you know, the world we find ourselves in today, where there is such a low bar to creating content. Just going out, experimenting, testing, learning. You know, it's never been easier.
Yeah.
Nick, thank you so much for joining today's session. Massively grateful, as always. As I was saying earlier, it's a shame we're not doing it in person, because, you know, you'd get a standing ovation off the stage now. But a big thank you for joining.
No, I appreciate being invited, Mark, and yeah, thanks you for asking me, and love geeking out on this. And anyone want to connect on LinkedIn, I've seen a few invites coming through, just shout, and if I can help, I will help.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nick. And that brings an end to today's session. So a big thank you to Tom, Josh, and Nick for joining and adding their insights. We will be doing our normal sort of follow-up material. So if anyone had to drop off or joined late, we'll make sure that all of the content is circulated afterwards with a link to some of the assets and resources that we've talked about today. And yeah, if there's anything that you'd like to follow up on, I'm sure all the speakers will be happy for you to connect on LinkedIn. And likewise, feel free to reach out to Daisy and myself. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday, and good luck to Man United in the Europa League final tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.